Stephen, welcome to Radio Parvasi and good morning.
Good morning, Rajinder. How are you?
Good morning, and I want to tell my listeners that me and Stephen, we started our journalistic career almost at the same time, and poppy flowers, which were like a pandemic in our community, many people were dying. It was a big issue, big problem at that time. And Stephen did a story on that on CBC when he was working in Toronto. And finally, the matter went to the Health Canada, and they actually determined that it's a prohibited substance. And finally, Peel Police then took the action. Many people were arrested, and lots of poppy flowers stock was confiscated, and it's a history. And credit goes to Stephen for all that, because he did a wonderful story. Many other media outlets, Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, they all followed after that. So Stephen, you have a long career in journalism, and you were talking to us when you were in US, and you are a dear friend also, and I'm always honored to talk to you.
It's always a pleasure to be on your show. Thank you. Thank you for having me so many times over the years. It's always great to talk to you.
Okay, Stephen, and tell us more about this story you have done for Fifth Estate. You went all the way to India, a family, Patel family from Gujarat. They came to Canada, wanted to cross the border. Everyone died during this, near the border. It was a very tragic incident, and it was all over the news it was international rather at that time. And as our Punjabis, Stephen, they want to come to Canada. It's their dream in life to come to Canada. We understand that people from Gujarat, they want to go to US. So you have been to all over the place, and particularly you visited their native village and their town. You met their relatives. You did really wonderful job, and now this is being it will be telecast on CBC. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so we worked with the team in India going to the village of Dingucha, which is just about an hour north of Ahmedabad in Gujarat. And, Gujaratis have been coming to North America for decades, going back to the 60s. But lately, because of immigration cutbacks in the U.S., going legally to the U.S. is incredibly difficult, even if you have family already there trying to sponsor you. And so there's this immigration system, this parallel immigration system that's essentially people using human smugglers. And what they do is they come to Canada because it's easier to get visas, tourist visas or whatever, to come to Canada, and then the smugglers sneak them into the U.S. And so this is what this Patel family did. It was Jagdish Patel was the father, his wife Vaishali Patel, and they had two children, 11-year-old Vihangi and 3-year-old Dharmik. And Jagdish wanted a better life for his kids, and he told his family that, but he didn't tell them what he wanted, what he was actually going to do. At least that's what his parents tell us. His parents say they knew they wanted to go to Canada for a better life for the children, but they didn't know that the family was going to try to sneak into the U.S. And so what we've learned is that they landed in Toronto on January 12th, and the RCMP have told us that they've been able to piece together a bit of the timeline, that the family spent some time in the greater Toronto area, taking ride shares. They were driven around by some individuals. They stayed in 2 hotels and a private residence. But the problem is, from the 15th of January until the 18th of January, when they crossed over the border and they ultimately died, police still don't know how the family got from the Toronto area to the Manitoba border. And Rajinder, the night they crossed, it was minus 35. It was a bare open field. There was a snowstorm the night before. They didn't have proper clothing. The smugglers that left them there and told them to walk across the border really, did not prepare them for the risks that they were going to take. And, I think if they had any idea what they were getting themselves into, they never would have done this. But, this is the problem, is that these smugglers, what we understand is that they promise everything, but they don't tell everybody about the risks that they're being put in. And unfortunately, this family of 4 lost their lives.
Yeah, Stephen, you must have seen that Gujarat is in the western part of India, and it's very, very high temperature over there. So I'm sure these people were not used to such kind of a harsh, cold weather. And I don't know, why didn't they wait for some more time if they had to cross the border?
So here's the thing that's interesting is that, yes, of course, they likely had never seen snow in their lives. And we obtained exclusive video, which you'll see in our report tonight on CBC on the 5th Estate. You'll see video of the family arriving at the airport. And they had very basic winter clothing. And what we understand is the smugglers may have given them some extra winter clothing, but the RCMP tells us it's winter clothing that you wouldn't even wear to shovel the driveway if it was -5.
Yeah.
But here it was -35 Celsius, and we spoke to many people in Manitoba who've lived there their entire lives and said they wouldn't have gone out that night. But what we understand is that there may have been a reason that they crossed there and not somewhere else. And I can tell you a bit more about some of the other stuff that we found in our investigation, in that the RCMP is now investigating an alleged human smuggler who was arrested in Washington State, so all the way on the west coast of the U.S. He's accused of running an operation in Blaine, Washington, which is an area where the climate is quite warm, and there's a lot of crossings. A lot of Indian migrants are taken across the border from Canada into the U.S. in that area. But what happens is, and in January, the U.S. Border Patrol is cracking down. They're arresting a lot of these migrants. And so this individual, his name is Rajinder Saini. He's a 48-year-old Indian national living illegally in the U.S. He has a criminal history. He had been deported before and actually snuck back into the U.S. through Canada himself using smugglers. And so he's under surveillance by U.S. Homeland Security, and they hear him back in January, around the same time the Patels are being moved. They hear him discussing what's happening in Blaine, Washington, and he says, these people, talking about Border Patrol, he says they know where we're coming from. They know where we're moving people. So if we want to do this now, talking about the smuggling, so if we want to do this now, we have to do it from Winnipeg. And so this alleged smuggler is talking about moving people through Winnipeg in January, and around the same time the Patels were being moved. So it could be that perhaps the Patels' destination was actually going to be Washington State, and they were going to cross over there, but because Border Patrol was cracking down and arresting people, that the smugglers panicked and took them through Manitoba instead, because it's a less popular crossing. It's much more dangerous in the wintertime. And so the RCMP are just now looking to investigate this individual, Rajinder Saini, to see if he has any connection to the Patel case. As of right now, there's no direct evidence, but experts we talk to say, could be more than just a coincidence that he's talking about, housing people in Canada, and he talks about having drivers. According to U.S. federal complaints, he's talking about having drivers in Toronto to take migrants around before they're brought into the U.S. And so it's a very interesting development in this case that could ultimately help find justice for the Patel family.
Okay, Stephen, decades back there was a very big tragedy in Punjab when hundreds of youth, they died in a boat in Malta. And it's a very, very well-known case in India when we talk about human smuggling. Hundreds of these young, people, they died. Most of them were from Punjab. But it never stopped even after that. I mean, governments of various countries, they came into action to stop such kind of tragedies. But nothing has changed, Stephen. It's still going on. And I know even after that, youth from Punjab, I mean, they're trying their, in any way, they want to come to this part of the world and taking risks of their life, money, everything. There are many movies, we know in Punjabi or in Hindi, many movies have been made on that. And I believe this is just tip of the iceberg, Stephen. It's still going on, and it has not stopped. Yeah. And we know a couple of years back when there was a influx of illegal migrants from U.S. to Canada, and Canada was very much, worried about that, concerned about that, and there was a hue and cry in Canada asking government to stop it on various borders of Canada and U.S.
Yeah, when we went to India to talk to the community there in Dingucha, we spoke to individuals who said the death of the Patel family hasn't stopped people trying to leave and trying to use human smugglers. Even though they know the risk, even though they know how dangerous it could be, people are still doing this. And one person estimated, hundreds or thousands have left after the Patel's death. And, when you go to these villages, you see there's rows and rows of empty homes because people have just left and they've gone. And, there's some family members remain back in India, but they're the ones getting the money from the folks who've gone and who've left. And so, it's interesting. We talked to the Gujarati State Police about their investigation, and they tried to tell us, oh yes, the human smuggling has slowed down, more people are aware of this, but the sense we get, from people telling us is that no, that's not the case, that people are still leaving, they'll still go, and the problem is gonna keep continuing. And in fact, in April of this year, there were 4 Gujarati students who got into a boat in Cornwall, Ontario, and they got into a human smuggler's boat in Cornwall, Ontario, and were crossing over into the U.S. And that's also a notorious human smuggling route because there's sort of a weird area there where there's a lot of different provincial borders. There's some indigenous reservations, territories, so there's territorial borders. There's the U.S.-Canada border, and there's a lot of islands and water. And so it's an easy area for smugglers to sneak through. And as they were crossing through, the boat started to sink. And none of these 4 young men had life jackets. None of them knew how to swim. And so as the boat got towards the shore, the driver of the boat just got out and escaped. He was eventually arrested. But luckily, the local police force was able to rescue these four young men and prevent them from being another tragedy. But it just goes to show you, these are the stories we hear about. There are so many more people who do get through, or people we may not have heard about that are losing their lives or taking incredible risks, and are doing these with young children, with taking, in the case of the Patel family, they had an 11-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son, and those are people who wanted to have a better life for their kids, and now the parents and the children are dead.
Yeah, Stephen, as I said in the beginning, that it's the dream of every Gujarati. We say them Guju. They want to come to US, or they want to send their children to US. And on the other hand side, it's dream of every Punjabi to come to Canada or to send their children. And I would like to congratulate Mark Kelly, your colleague, who has done such a wonderful story on international students coming from Punjab. People are selling their land, their homes. They are taking such a big risk to send their children here. And when those kids come here and they see the reality, and parents don't know under how much pressure these children are going through, and we are seeing now many suicidal deaths here in Canada. So all these kids who are international students come here for big dreams, and when they come and when they face the reality, it's other way around. And I would like to congratulate CBC for highlighting this matter and going in depth on this Fifth Estate program.
Yeah, if people want to see the episode, it was our episode last week that my colleague Mark Kelly did on the Fifth Estate. If you go to YouTube and type in CBC, the Fifth Estate, you can watch his episode. And it was a great episode, highlighting exactly what you say, the dreams of these children and the families that mortgage their life savings, raise incredible amounts of money to send these kids to university or colleges here, career colleges that are basically just factories for taking the money from foreign students. And it's an incredibly disappointing and tragic story because kids are losing their lives. There's suicides in this community of kids who just can't handle the reality once they come here. And it's such a tragic story that I think more people in Canada need to open their eyes to see what's happening. And I hope Mark's story last week, and I hope our story tonight will really shed a light on what's happening and the risks people are taking to try to achieve this dream of a better life, but not realizing that they're putting too much at risk to achieve that dream.
Yeah, Stephen, this story is viral in our community. I have got from at least 15, 20 people. They are sending me this YouTube link of this story, and I'm sure it must have been shared in Punjab also, but I don't know how much lesson they will learn from this story.
I don't know, and I mean, I hope our story, I hope our story is shared in Gujarat as well, because, I mean, that was a big message from people we spoke with. They, come to Canada, stay here, work, use the legal ways to come to Canada. And, the Gujarati police say, are trying to blaming the Canadian police, saying that they haven't cooperated enough. And Canadian police are saying, no, we've given you all the information you need. And so there's questions about how serious the investigation is into what's happening. And, it's a tragic story. And I think, it really starts in these villages and in these places back in India, where people need to realize the reality and the dangers that they face if they try to put their fate in the hands of human smugglers.
Okay, Stephen, thank you so much for talking to us and sharing this information. My belief is that these international students coming from India, they are not here for studies. They are here to settle in Canada, to get their PR. They come with big dreams. But again, I have been talking to all of our immigration ministers in the past, Stephen. I have spoken with Mr. Mendicino, John McCallum, Ahmed Hussain, even now with this Sean Fraser. So whenever I interview them, whenever I talk to them, I try to tell them the reality, but they're not, ready to listen to us. All they're saying, no, they're international students, they come here for study, then they want to go back. I have never seen any kid going back. So they want to settle here, they want to get PR and make money. That's all their motive is. So I don't know, nothing wrong with that, but there are so many challenges now we are facing here in Brampton, here in Surrey area, where we have hundreds and thousands of these kids. They don't have any place to live, to stay. So many issues related to this inflow of these international students and those illegal immigrants. But again, you guys are doing wonderful job. And when we can watch this, your special episode of Fifth Estate, which you have done?
Yes. So the episode of the Fifth Estate airs tonight on CBC Television, which is Channel 6. And that's at 9 o'clock tonight, 9 p.m. You can also stream it on CBC Gem, which is a CBC app. And if you don't catch it tonight or don't set your PVR, you can always watch it on YouTube, on the CBC Fifth Estate YouTube channel. So I hope the audience will tune in and watch this.
What should be the title of this episode, Stephen?
It's called Death at the Border.
Death at the Border. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. You have really, really worked hard. You went all over the place, tried to gather evidences or all those documents to make it, to do the documentation. And I am sure when we will watch this episode, after that we will try to talk to you again once more whenever you have time.
Well, always a pleasure, and yes, whenever you need to, I'll be happy to talk to you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rajinder. My pleasure.
Thanks a lot.